Max, welcome.
Hello.
Yes.
So I think we can start, Janti.
Yes, we shall start. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for all of you. Thank you very much for taking your time to attend to our webinar today, which will be the topic sustainability in the European market for home decoration, home textiles. And I will do a very short introduction about CBI. I keep it short because the most interesting part will be after that. And that will be presented by Kees, Remco and Max Gilderman. Very special welcome to him, and thank you for your time to present in our webinar. Later on, they will introduce themselves because they are much better in that. So next slide, please, Kees. Just some small house rules. We are not able to hear or see you, so please, we do like very much your questions, so please put these into the question tab, and we will have time to answer these, and we will also have times in between to answer your questions. So please do not hesitate and put all your questions you have about the subject in the question tab. And at the end of the webinar, we will have a small questionnaire for you. If you have some time to fill it out, we will be very grateful for that. And all our webinars are being recorded, and we will share the recorded webinar with you as well as the presentation. So you don't need to take notes. We will share all the information with you. Next, please.
Oops.
So small introduction, my name is Janti Rutte and I work for the CBI Market Intelligence, and I do the sectors home decoration, home textile, as well as the coffee and cocoa. And I have been before that a green coffee trader for more than 25 years, totally different market, but also very interesting. Next, please. So what is CBI? It's the Center for the Promotion of Imports from Developing Countries. And what we do is we support small to medium-sized exporters to strengthen their economic, social, and environmental sustainability through export to Europe and also to regional markets. And we offer practical solutions for the bottlenecks that we have in the export value chain. And we create values through knowledge, and we deploy networks in the European markets, and together with the developing countries and the promising sectors. And one of the bottlenecks in the export value chain is the lack of good market intelligence. And that's basically why we're here today, to share that information with you. Next, please. We are active in certain countries. We call them the target countries. And you see here all of them, which are currently our target countries. And next, please. And we are active within those target countries. We are active in 14 sectors. And well, obviously today we're here for the home decoration, home textiles. But here you see also the other sectors where we are active in. Next, please. So what do we do with market information? We make studies of market information, and we divide them into modules. One is the market analyze part, and one is the market entry part. And we have very practical and good statistical information on what is the demand in Europe, and what are, for example, the most promising countries in Europe, and which trends offer opportunities for you. And on the market entry part, we have the studies based on buyer requirements. So what are the buyer requirements to even enter the European market, or tips to find European buyers, or how to do business with them, how to organize your exports. And recently we have started also to add the study how to go digital. Next, please. So for the home decoration, home textile, we also make special fact sheets because there's a high need of that. So we can also adjust to the sector. And we have made the market channels and segments in this sector, and a special model on sustainability. And we are currently working on terms and conditions and alternative distributions, which will be published during the summer. So keep an eye on the website. That's where we will post all our studies. And besides studies, we also make product fact sheets. So those are more into-depth fact sheets on the most promising export products in Europe. And well, obviously we provide webinars, which are all free, and we place news items, actual subjects related to the home decoration, home textile market. So have a look at our website and you can find all the relevant information which can be very useful for you. Next, please. So now I would like to give the word to Kees, who will introduce Max and Remco shortly. And thank you very much again for taking your time and to take us through this interesting subject. And well, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much, Jantien. Make sure you check out the website regularly. It's also free of charge, so a lot of you will love that. But really do check it out because there's always updates every time. So yeah, we are Karine Matser, who's the market research at Globally Cool. She's been very much part of the preparation to this webinar. Thank you, Karine, for that. She's also there. Myself then, I have 30+ years in home decoration, home textiles, started working for a fair trade importer a long time ago. And I'm an independent coach and matchmaker and trainer with a focus on sustainability and currently working amongst others in Cambodia for CBI. Remco, who are you?
Okay, like you, I'm a consultant for CBI, currently working in Bangladesh, and I've been working as an entrepreneur and product development and business consultant since 1995. And along that, I also have my own business developing accessories for people in wheelchairs. Thanks, Kees.
All right, so then our special guest, Max, longtime buddy of mine. Max, would you introduce yourself? I'm very proud to have you. You will be part of the conversation today with Remco and me. Can you tell the listeners who you are? If you'd unmute, I think, Max. Hello, Max. Yeah, I think, Max, are you there?
Yes, I think now you can hear me, yeah?
Yeah, I can hear you.
My microphone was still muted. So sorry, I actually did catch COVID during our days in Frankfurt last week, so a little bit limited, but I'm here and fully focused and happy to be here, and it's also an honor for myself. We had a few sessions together, CBI and me and some others before the pandemic for a few times, and that was always, I thought, very creative and good sessions where I felt one could really help. So my background is I did study fashion design at some point, but never went into practice, and then went into consulting, and the focus from the beginning since more than 10 years is sustainability in textile supply chains, but also then more and more in communication and marketing. So nowadays I run a consulting agency that is focused on sustainability strategies for textile and fashion brands, and yeah, we have a very holistic view on this, including all kind of cultural aspects into sustainability, which we believe are the key also to implementing sustainability at the end of the day. And so yeah, besides working with big corporates, we always also are very much looking into the small businesses, and believe that a lot of the key change-making opportunities also lie within these areas. So I'm very happy to be here today, and hope to be able to give a few more insights into the world of sustainability, which is becoming more and more the new normal in the markets, at least, since yeah, sustainability has become more than just a marketing tool by now, and it's really yeah, it's on demand, quite high demand, if you still find the right price point, I would say. But that's, I'm sure we're going to talk about more later.
Yeah, let's talk about all of that. Thanks again, Max, for joining us. Let's just kick off. Not without having said to you, use the question button. We'd like to interact with you all the time. So even during our presentation and our chat, We want you to chat along with us. So use the question box for any questions you might have. And then if we find interesting questions, we'll definitely go into those discussions then and there. So don't hold back. Many of you have been in this webinar for long, so you know how it works. We want to interact with you. I think if at the end of the day of the presentation, we have so many fundamental questions still in the Q&A, we haven't done our work properly. So just talk with us. We are very open to that. Okay, let's start. Sustainability in home. And we're first going to talk a little bit about definitions in a very practical way. And we talk about often heard or used labels, legal, non-legal requirements. And we're going to compare them a little bit and see what the developments are on both sides there. And then we're going to talk a lot about the communicative side to sustainability, and which hopefully will give you a few insights. Then the Q&A session at the end. But again, I said to you just now, let's have Q&A all the time. We'd like to hear from you and talk to you. Okay, so while I'm talking, Remco and Max will look at the question box and the other colleagues as well. So we'll, okay, let's start with definition. I would like to be very practical in terms of definitions. So the easiest one we know, and we're using it a lot also in CBI, is the 3 Ps. And I'm sure all of you know that this is people, planet, and profit. 3 Ps. Let's go into this a little bit more from the perspective of maybe history. And the most conventional and first way of doing business was from the profit side. Profit maximization was the subject conventionally of all businesses. So the question was, how can I make a lot of profit in a short as possible time? And that's how it all started. Obviously, businesses are there for profit, and you are there for profit, and that should be the way it is. But gradually, of course, we found out that there should be more than that. And the second development there was green development. And the key question there was, how can I make profit, but also take care of the environment, of the environmental impact that I will have as a business? And that was the second stage. And then, of course, people came in. You know, really, there's no way we can, if we save the planet and the people have all died, what are we doing? So it was very logical for the third element to come in, which we now call sustainable development, which is how can I make profit and benefit the environment and society? So people, planet, and profit in balance. So this should be the goal of sustainable design. And in CBI, we use design, the design word there, because we feel you have control. You have a way to design your business and your collections into a more sustainable direction. So we added design there to say, yes, it's an active approach. Don't sit back and think you'll be sustainable if you don't work for it. So the sustainable design and the 3 Ps. I'm going to talk much more about this now. So let's look at a few examples of the people side to business. Remco, could you take us through this maybe? What is one element of social that we could think of? An example here.
One element of social we could think of is the kind of people you employ within your community, within your company. And in the case of the slide you're showing now, Bawa Latumaini, Wing of Hope, it means, from Kenya. And they make beautiful jewelry. And in production, a large part of the people they work with, they come from a background which is poor to ultra poor. And in that sense, they can really, I mean, even buying these products also contributes to a better life of the artisans working for Bawa in this case. Cool. And it also helps to put the community on the map.
Okay, wonderful. Now, we just talked about creating a balance between people, planet, and profit. So this is very much a socially oriented business. So Max, does it make sense? Does it create extra trouble for you when you go for underprivileged or maybe rural community-based concepts, or is it just only positive for your commercial side, or does it also have issues?
Well, I mean, everything has always two sides, so I'm sure one can't say it's only easy, but in general, I would say this is always a rewarding thing. You just need to be aware that also this can come with complications, in the sense of like once you touch the topics of like interacting with marginalized groups and so on, maybe there comes the question, why do you work with these ones but not with those ones? So once you started showcasing yourself as being conscious and sensible to marginalized groups, then you will also be looked at that and kind of criticized on that if you do something maybe not so perfectly aligned. So in general, if you go into kind of social, cultural topics, I would always just recommend to be very sensible and try to really work with the people and be aware that there might be different kind of needs included. So yeah, it is maybe the baseline as for any kind of collaboration in the world. It needs communication, it needs time for the relationship. That is the base of a collaboration. And in this case, it's the same. I would say if you work with certain groups that might be marginalized, that might have a different kind of standing in society, then you always have to be a bit sensible. What does it mean? And maybe you have to try to put extra energy into also taking in their perspective regularly. So a change of point of view. But okay. I think for the outside, also for marketing your products and for telling the story of your brand, of your products, of your community, your crafts, your skills, I think this is always going to be very beneficial and being awarded kind of and rewarded from the market over here. Yeah, it's kind of this yeah, social on the edge to being also charitable in certain ways. It's usually rewarded quite well on the European market, I would say.
Oh, okay, thanks. So that's okay. Another example of people side, Made 51. Remco, what are they doing?
Well, Made 51 is actually an initiative of UNHCR, and they are very well known for their work with refugees. And what they have found, that in the refugee camps, the average stay of a refugee in those camps is about 17 years. And you can imagine, if you're staying in a camp for 17 years, you get a little bored, and it's very hard to fill the days. So what they've done, they've developed an initiative where artisans who are in the camps are actually allowed to work and create products in home textiles, in home decoration, or in fashion accessories. And they work together with local enterprises in the country where the camp is to export these goods. And so what they are actually doing is providing the artisans in the camps with work, and also a way to be and sustain themselves and fill the days also, because you can imagine it's hard to be locked up in a camp with nothing to do.
Cool. So you can imagine that, and the insight here was also that there's so many people in camps who are actually amazingly skilled, and they're actually artisans, and those skills and techniques are then not used, and they are so in that sense it also works for your products. Of course, one drawback could be that supply chain sometimes could be interrupted, and that could disturb your commercial side of the business. But special interest group, do we know other special interest groups? Max, what these people work with refugees? What other examples do we have of special interest groups?
Well, I think, I mean, this is probably the most prominent one, and also interesting if you look at it. I mean, how it took, or it's still taking years to build it up and to really make it nice. But I think, I mean, that you always have this. I think in Bangladesh, for example, at the moment, you probably have a few initiatives around the Rohingya that fleet over there, because there's this huge and very complicated situation of like more than 1 million refugees. And I think, for example, like NGO like BRIC in Bangladesh went into special programs to work with Rohingyas and to also support them in kind of keeping their craft running. And I think this, I mean, yeah, what you said before, like besides this being like a possible way of not getting bored, etc., it's also obviously a cultural point of being able to nourish and kind of take care of your heritage and your roots, which I think here is an extra benefit for the people involved.
Cool, thank you so much. Of course, we could also think of women empowerment as a theme, and a lot more. So that's another example of social. A third example is where you work according to clear social principles. Fair trade is one of those examples where, whether you're not part of WFTO, which is the Associated World Fair Trade Organization, with a real guaranteed membership, which means it's an audited fair trade system, or you can work according to fair trade principles that you describe yourself or certify in another way. So this way of working guarantees that people in your business, your workers and artisans, get proper treatment, mostly from the social side. So those are three examples. I'm sure you can come up with many different types of people first concepts. Let's look at environmental. Okay, recycled. Remco, what is recycled, and what types of recycling do we actually know?
Well, there's many types of recycling, and we like to call it upcycling. I'm always being corrected when I say recycling. I'm being corrected by the Bangladeshi companies I work with. Sir, it's not recycling, it's upcycling, because we take something which is waste and we make it better. And there's many ways you can use, for instance, old cement bags. You can, the example of wood and sole. They use post-harvested teak wood. There is also, for instance, initiative in Bangladesh where they have all the cut-offs of the garments industry, which they crush and respin into recycled yarn, and that also complies with the global recycle standard. So there is many angles to recycling. The idea is always that you use a raw material which has already been used before, or is actually a waste or byproduct, and that you then turn into a new raw material which you can use in your production, and in that way you reduce your carbon footprint.
Cool. So obviously from the pictures here we can see that could end up in really attractive and relevant products for the market. Are there also potential snags in using leftovers or wastes?
Yes, well, one of the issues you're experiencing yourself is Cambodia, where they use beautiful old Japanese kimonos to make cushions. The issue you have is that it's very hard in terms of traceability. It's not clear where these products come from, and because it's not clear where they come from, it's not clear how they have been produced originally, and if they comply with the European market access requirements. So traceability could be an issue. Another issue could be consistency in supply, and because you're using a byproduct or a waste product, it is sometimes very hard to get a consistent quality, but also get consistent quantities when you need them. So it is quite hard. But if you design your supply chain in such a way that you can cope with these things, it can be a fantastic source of raw materials.
Cool. We'll go into recycling a little bit more later on, especially with Mark's view on the textile industry. But for now, this is clear. I already see a lot of people in the box saying, I also do this. Wonderful. I'm sure we have all of examples. Another way of using the environmental side is using local materials. Max, why is local materials in principle sustainable? What's the point there?
Well, I mean, we live in a globalized world, but we also live in a world where we realize that we have to focus more on the local aspect again. And actually, it's one of my favorite kind of buzzwords is glocal, joining the two. And I think this is an important kind of part of all future developments for sustainability. So whenever you have materials locally, obviously ideally still grown in a sustainable way, not just any material in an ideal world, but as much as you can make use of your local materials. Obviously you save logistics, you save all kind of footprint from moving stuff back and forth. I mean, global supply chains nowadays, if you look at the mass production, have created systems that are really quite mad, where textiles or materials are been brought back and forth between countries just for the cheap labor, and you create really crazy global routes of shipping materials before it actually gets somewhere. And with kind of growing transparency needs for products, the European Union, I'm sure we're going to talk more about that, is bringing in quite a lot of new legislation that will also ask people to provide more information about the products. This will include also mileage, like how long did your product travel, etc. In the future, you will be able to really focus on products with low mileage that are quite locally produced, and use this as a clear sustainability argument. And obviously, whenever you have local materials, you can always have also much better relationship with your suppliers, because they are locally, and you have full control, or as much as possible control over the quality. You can always react more flexible on like changes in demand, etc. So you also have a practical and management kind of benefit. But first of all, yeah, it's not being shipped around. It's kind of a new old way of doing business. And it's one that also, especially for smaller business, and obviously everything around maybe potential craft elements, will be helpful for your storyline and will be appreciated in the overall branding.
Cool. Yeah, that's true. And one of the things we had with the vetiver from Tatjana was that it was such an exciting material. People hadn't seen it. It was undiscovered, let's say, and it created a lot of buzz just from being new and exciting and the properties of the materials. So it sometimes can also give you an advantage of bringing your own local material to the export markets.
And maybe to add one thing, I mean, we are living in a world which is becoming increasingly virtual in many ways. We are spending more and more times in like virtual worlds. We're talking to each other on video screens, etc. And there is a clear kind of contra trend also to things that are haptical and that one can use, and people are becoming refascinated with materials and with surfaces. So if you have, I mean, looking here at the presentation, these bowls from Madagascar, I would immediately, one feels one wants to touch them. So this is something one can work with, and which is really, I think, a good contrast, and it will be good for products in the future, that you make them in a way you want to touch them. That's going to be good for your product.
Okay, wonderful. So
yeah, and the whole story around this, because it's a round story. The company that makes these bowls, they actually grow this vetiver on their own land. So it's local, but it's local within 20 meters. So the vetiver is grown about 20 meters from the atelier where they make these bowls.
Cool. So the 3 Ps, you know, are almost like clearly coming together here in one product, if you do it well. So you really recommend it. A third one is again related to lowering your footprint, this time in transport. So if you are able to create products that are maybe flat pack, or you can use nesting, things like that, to save on transport cost, obviously this is better for the environment, but it's also much better for your cost, obviously. So here again, the P's come together. Okay, let me give an example where the 3 P's are actually coming together in one action this company from Vietnam took. They are Ando Ceramics, small company like most of yours, 50 people max, based in Ba Chang village, which is a village in Vietnam that is known for its ceramic production. It has a very long history in that, and a lot of people are still doing ceramics, and they took part in a lot of sustainable innovation projects. And one of the things they did in their production was to switch from coal to gas. Now, what happened there? So on the planet side, we found that there was no more smog in the village. Before, when they were using coal all over the village, there was lots of pollution. So by just using a slightly more cleaner energy source, you are creating planet benefits, but also health benefits. Obviously, people benefits, because both people in the village, but also in the factory, they became much healthier because of this switch to a new energy source. And then on the profit side, a lot of positives there. Interestingly enough, that's a potential dilemma, is that the gas was more expensive than coal, but they found out that it paid itself back because they had more quality control because of this new energy. So in the firing, in the kiln, they had much more control, and therefore in the end they were saving cost, even though the energy itself was more expensive. They had less burning time, so they didn't have to put the kiln on for such a long time anymore. I think they reduced by 30% or something like that. And they had a whiter product. So that was very good for the market. And they became known actually for the thinness of the material, but also for how white the glaze is. And so here the 3 Ps actually came together really well. And examples like that, of course, are ideal. And you always have to work on those.
Kees,
Yes.
if I may add, I mean, the profit side is very interesting, because I've had these discussions also before with companies, for instance, that use wood to burn their fires, and the argument is always, yes, but natural gas is so expensive. But here you see that despite the fact that it's more expensive, you can use it in such a way that it actually saves money. So you have to look a little bit further sometimes.
Yes, you have to look at the whole picture of production when you introduce a new source of energy, obviously. And when you do, you might be surprised how positive it can work out with a slightly more expensive or higher energy bill. Yeah. So yes, interesting. Now another one. Sorry, Remco.
Well, it also connects to what Max was saying. He mentioned the word sensible, or you could say realistic in this case, because in an ideal world, you would like to have 100% carbon-free fuel to do your glazing. But of course, this is not always possible. And then moving to the next best thing is a realistic and viable option.
Cool. Yeah. And of course, it's always a process. Yeah. Maybe their next step will be, yes, to go into even more cleaner, more sustainable energy sources. So you're never stopping in sustainable design. Okay, then a term we often hear, Max, about sustainability is circularity or the circular economy. What does this actually refer to?
Well, I mean, as it's shown here, and as the word suggests, obviously, it's looking into cycles and circles, and the baseline idea is that, yeah, you don't create waste anymore because everything stays in the cycle. So it's actually well, let's say biomimicry baseline, the idea to follow how nature does things. And in nature, there's always this beautiful story how some of the founders of Cradle to Cradle, which is one of the methodologies for materials, how to become aligned with circular economy. Then if you look at the example of trees, etc., I think they used the cherry tree, that everything always is nourishing. Yeah? So the product of a tree at the end of the day becomes, if it falls down to the ground again, nutrition for the tree itself to grow again. So everything always stays in the cycle of things. So if you have a product, you create a bag, then ideally this bag at the end of its life can just dissolve itself in the earth without doing any harm. So really, if you look into the circular economy from a product point of view, you have to design for circularity. You have to look into what materials do you use and how do you put them together, and also if there's any kind of other added elements to the materials, like as soon as you dye them, or if you use any other finishing, you obviously already have a different material than where you started. So yeah, that's the baseline. You ideally have biodegradable materials from the beginning. You combine them in a way that they, at the end of their life, can just dissolve as a biodegradable product.
Cool. Now, this is maybe one of the hardest thing to do, to actually be totally circular as a business, especially for small scale manufacturers like most of you in a developing context. So most of you will find that most of your control is in the first segments of the cycle, material, the buying and use of materials, and also your production. In production, you have control over your productivity, how you treat your people, and waste in your factory. So those two areas, and maybe a little bit in distribution. We saw this example of a flat pack stool. So on the right side of this cycle is where most of you have most of your control. Is that a problem, Max? Can you also start somewhere and start where you are strongest and not be circular immediately?
Absolutely, and I think, I mean, there's disadvantages but also advantages of being a smaller player in this area, because the big ones usually work with very complicated products, also in terms of chemical inputs, etc. And they really struggle at the moment to phase such chemicals out of the supply chains. But if you're a smaller company, and again, possibly also look into local material sourcing, where you know where it's grown and it's natural materials ideally, then you have actually a quite good chance to design circular ready kind of products. Maybe you won't be the one at the end who kind of creates an end of life solution, but that's also not needed if your product is actually compostable. So yeah, with the design, the material, the production phase, you have an incredible influence on creating more sustainable circular products. I think, I mean, obviously, a very interesting part will be the communication. How do you kind of prove this to your customers? Because certifying this is expensive. But I think there's very easy ways, as long as you stick with natural materials and you can bring in transparency, then you can actually show quite easily how to create a circular product, at least in terms of biodegradability. And yeah, this is also, I think, will be quite demanded in the market in the next couple of years.
Okay, coming back to that later. So yeah, don't be afraid to focus on the area where you are strongest. For now, it's extremely hard to do this whole cycle for anybody in any business. And because first and foremost, you also have limited control over how this consumer is using your product, and finally how it's disposed. That's another end of the world usually. But there are ways, and Max says maybe as a small business, you also have advantages there actually. So one spectacular example, and maybe Remco, you can tell that story, is Circular Textiles by the New Denim Project. What are they actually doing?
Well, they are recycling denim to the point where I think they make it into new yarns, and they have a weavery, a weaving mill. And out of this denim, they made a whole range of new products, and they were actually under the umbrella of CBI and showcased their products at Maison et Objet in Paris during one of the shows that CBI organized there. And then they connected, for instance, with a big American buyer like West Elm. And they together developed a whole range of products which were sold through all the West Elm outlets.
Yeah, and the key maybe here to being successfully circular is not only to use, they are using industrial waste, so cut-offs from the garment industry, and then recycling that into products which are bought by a trader such as West Elm and are used by a food company, a food brand. As you can see, it's all food related items. So the key to success in becoming really totally circular is to have this collaboration across the cycle. They succeeded, and so look for collaborations. A lot of buyers are actually interested in what you can do, and you know, they in themselves are again connected to maybe people in the end market who could then make sure that it's actually used and sold. So look for collaborations, don't go it alone. Most of the time that's really not necessary, And this is a very, very interesting story for buyers. So that's actually a marketing plus if you can offer stories like this. Okay, we're checking your question box, Remco. If you find anything, I'm sure you could mention something. Okay, so here the circularity is succeeded, but it's not always the easiest thing to do. Right? Let's move on to another topic that we often hear related to sustainability: legal and non-legal requirements. And let's go into them a little bit. In the past, in previous webinars, we've already touched a lot on market access requirements. So we're not going to stay too long there, but let's talk about legal requirements. What does that actually mean, Remco? What's a legal
requirements are developed by European Union, and they're basically focused on consumer safety. That is the leading principle. And for instance, when it comes to the chemical components in your product, if you're talking textiles, you're talking dyes, for instance, there's all kinds of rules and regulations which have been summarized under the REACH regulations. And it's very simple. If your products do not comply with the EU market access requirements, like the slide is showing, they simply do not come in. And the good thing about the European Union focusing so much on consumer safety is that slowly but surely, the market access requirements for the European Union have become leading in the world. And the idea is if you're able to comply with the European market access requirements, you can more or less safely assume that your products are also suitable to export to other parts of the world.
Cool. So examples are ASO-free dyes, CE marking in lighting, as you mentioned, REACH compliance. There's lots of regulation that you have to comply with or meet in order to actually enter the EU successfully. So question to us here is, so does compliance make you sustainable in itself? Max, what do you think? If you comply, let's say with REACH or ASO-free, does that make you sustainable?
Well, I have a bit of a maybe more classic grassroots standing there and would say no. I mean, the baseline idea of sustainability, if you come from a more kind of progressive point of view, is sustainability always has to be seen in relation to the average of the market. And so the idea behind sustainability is that we have ambitious goals to become really sustainable, which is, yeah, a big kind of ambition. And if you look at the SDGs of the United Nations, you can see how complex it is with like 17 different goals, and they are all really big goals. And if you look at these kind of compliance levels here, it's just the market standard. You just need to see this as the baseline standard. It can help you to get on the way to become more sustainable. In that sense, ASO-free and REACH compliance and so on, they're good guidelines. But if you comply with them, you're just on the legal side, and you're not just kind of forward, you're not ahead of the market. And basically sustainability is always also about being ahead of the market, because you can only be more sustainable in comparison to the average market. And if the average market is ASO-free and REACH compliant, and you are also, then you're not sustainable, you're just on average. So in that sense, to be brutal, no, you're not sustainable at all yet if you comply with the normal legal rights.
Cool. Okay, Max, I like you to be brutal. That helps us a lot. Max is basically saying, well, you know, to be sustainable, you need to be a little bit more ambitious and go over the basic market standard. How do you feel about this, Remco? Does ASO-free or CE, are you sustainable?
Well, no, I agree with Max. It's the market standard, so you have to comply to have your products even admitted in the EU. The good thing is, when it comes to sustainability, market access requirements are, as it says, requirements, and sustainable practices, you could say, are in a way desirable. They help you in setting you apart from the market standards. What you, however, see is that there's a shift going on. This is not a static situation. Like you said earlier, Kees, it is also a process, and that process also applies to the market. For instance, take the European Green Deal, that it focuses on sustainability in such a way that a lot of sustainable concepts will eventually also become market access requirements. So in that sense, you have to keep developing and to stay ahead in order to have a competitive edge from the market side.
Cool. That's lovely. Max, can you tell us a little bit about the future of compliance? Where is it going, do you think, according to your vision?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad Remco already touching on this. I mean, in that sense, we are seeing a new set of legislation coming up, which is not fully defined yet, but there's this thing called the EU textile strategy that was published in March this year, and which is now step by step being kind of brought into legislation. So we now have defined goals of the European Union, how to deal with textiles in the future and how to make them way more sustainable. And actually the main goal or the main framework around this is the circular economy that we've touched before right now. So the European Union is setting a new framework that has the goal of becoming a circular economy. In that sense, it's a bit different now than these compliances we talked about before, because they are kind of really just baseline compliances. Now the European Union is actually setting goals that help you actively to become sustainable. So if you kind of follow the new legislation, or if you comply with that at the moment, this will actually really raise your game and make you a much more sustainable company. And to be a bit more concrete, what is coming up there is eco directory. You will have to, you will get more guidance on what materials are seen as preferred materials, are seen as more sustainable materials that you are allowed to use, or in what ways are you allowed to use them. There will be the product passport. You will be required to offer way more data about your product, more transparency about your supply chain, about the way how your products are put together, and about the possible impacts. You will have to report more about like the impact of your business. And you will have to look into recycling in a whole new level. You will in the future be responsible for your product even after you sold it. I mean, obviously, all of this is limited mostly, first of all, to bigger companies, and it will step by step also be relevant for the smaller companies. But as an overall development, you can see that there's really a whole set of relatively strict rules that maybe a few years ago the industry could not have imagined at all yet, which are now coming to life, and that are quite market changing. So here, if you are, let's say, complying with the legislation that we're going to have in 5 years in the European Union, I would actually say you probably have done a huge jump to be a really way more sustainable company than before.
Okay, Max, thanks for that insight. So we just talked about always people and planet sides of sustainability. Does the new norms in compliance, do they also look at social or just environmental, or is it going to be both?
Yeah, well, basically they are really focused on environmental aspects. Obviously, you can't fully separate that anyway. A lot of those effects are interlinked, but in terms of the guidance that they give, they do focus a lot on processes, materials, product performance, environmental impact, etc. Which is also, yeah, let's say traditionally the easier way of controlling things. Social aspects are always more complicated, as I'm sure you know also, but this is an interesting aspect because it's also highly criticized by a lot of actors from the civil society in Europe, in the European Union, people like Fair Wear Foundation or Fair Trade, etc. So I'm sure we can expect also development on that side. but it will probably kind of just follow the development of the circular economy. But in general, if we look into the social side and the plans of the European Union on circular economy, I think especially in this kind of context here and the group of people we're with, one needs to look into the potential impacts on the sourcing markets, really. Because the baseline idea is that products in the future that come to European Union should also be recycled within the European Union. So there will be a shift also on attention where things happen and where they can be repaired or reproduced, etc. So the supply chains of the future will look quite differently. And at the moment, really, it's not clear yet how they develop. But yeah, I would really always suggest in the next couple of years to follow the European Union legislation, because that will make a big impact. And as Remco said before, European Union has a track record already of setting relatively strict kind of frameworks that then at some point do become more or less a global standard.
Okay. I think Jose Guardiola is making a very interesting remark about that you can actually never say I'm sustainable. It's always a process, and we're now looking at this from the legal point of view. We now find out also by Mac's story is that compliance or the legal side will push companies to be actually really sustainable or more sustainable. So from the legal side, yeah, Jose is definitely making a point that you cannot stand still. You have to move forward. Let's look at the non-legal side. How do we feel about this? So here we also talk about non-legal requirements. What are we talking about when we talk about non-legal requirements, Remco?
Well, you could say these are the more desirable aspects of your business, and approaching production and all the other aspects within your company in a sustainable manner is, of course, a desirable thing. Like Max was saying in the beginning, sustainability is increasing in importance, and what we also see is that more than 70% of the consumers is interested in buying sustainable products. So you could see that from a marketing point of view, it is interesting to communicate your sustainable values. However, the story is always how can you prove your claims? In that sense, certification, for instance, is a good way of showing the things that you're doing and actually proving them by having an internationally recognized certification standard.
Cool. Let's come back to that in a minute. So the fact that social values and environmental values and ethical behavior as a business are not yet legal, but something is coming up. Max just told us. Does it mean that it is less important? I mean, otherwise it would be legal, or what is the philosophy there? Who would like to?
Are you asking me, Kees, or?
Well, whoever, Max, you.
Well, I mean, it's complicated to answer this, but the baseline from my point of view is always, it is so much more difficult to measure social values and measure well-being and measure like if somebody is doing good or not good. It's obviously we have also as societies and so on created systems that aim to judge this, but yeah, they always fall short also in many ways, you know. So it is in general a more complex context to get clarity on this. So I also always think we are not that far yet with our systems on this planet to have really a good idea on how to push this. I think on environmental aspects you can really follow numbers relatively well, and then obviously you always learn that maybe impacts are different, science gets more smart, etc. You adapt, okay. But with the social aspect, it is just so much more complex on judging and measuring what is good, what is bad. And in that sense, it is more complex. And many companies also say, well, we are also lost in this double battle. We have our own morals as a company, maybe from Germany, from the Netherlands, from wherever, but then also we're working in a country which has certain laws that we also have to follow, which might not even fully, you know, align. So,
Okay.
I mean, that's the job of the company, and it's their choice to source in certain countries at the end of the day. But yeah, it is even more complex in these kind of ways where you have the culture clash, you have clashes in kind of different legislations, and you have a lack of really good methods to measure and in that sense evaluate. So yeah, way more complex.
So not less important, but maybe a little bit more complex. That could
Actually,
be the
maybe one thing to add, sorry, but in terms of importance, the social aspect is one thing. Obviously, also how do you tell your stories and how to be a nice company. But also, I will always advise to not fall short on this, because it's not just about the social aspect. It's about the cultural aspect. It's about the culture in your company. So the better you are in your company in terms of dealing with all the people that work for you, then the better also your products are.
Yeah.
It is obviously there's always limits within that, but in a very general way, I do all the companies where they take care of the employees and they take care of a good company culture, from my experience, more successful in this kind of world than the other ones. So if you don't go for just let's say a brutal mass market approach where you don't care at all, then I think you will always have a better result if you have a motivated workforce that really goes with you all the way along. And if you want to be sustainable anyway, you can't do this without your whole kind of employee set. They need to be on board.
Cool. That's a very valuable addition. So we're not saying no, it's less important when it's not legal yet, because we actually see a lot of that coming up in law in the coming periods. At the same time, to be a socially friendly organization, that will also give you much more productivity, and also the market really appreciates you being a nice and clean organization. So let's move on to the thing that we notice when we go, especially to Heimtech's fairs, like textile-oriented fairs, is we see like a whole forest of certifications being used by many companies there. Like the one here on the left-hand side, we see a range of actually very different certifications. On the right-hand side, similar. So if we look at this, do we feel that if you certify, then you stand out against your competition, you differentiate in a marketing term, or not? Does certification help you or not in terms of your competitive edge to other companies? Who would like to answer that one?
Well, I'll give a first shot in answering this one. Yes, it will make you stand out, but of course it also depends on the environment where you are marketing your goods. And like you said, Kees, at Heimtextil, what we saw with most companies there, that they do have all these certifications, or at least they claim they have them. In that sense, it does not make you stand out because everybody else has the same. And then it comes to other aspects of how you communicate your story behind your company. And that's also what Max is saying. It's also a matter of storytelling. However, not having these certification would set you back. So in that sense, you would be at a disadvantage.
Cool.
So in that, yes.
Sorry. Yeah. So to Max, maybe, where do you see certification going? Do you see that moving into a new direction?
Yes, but maybe just one step back. I mean, I agree with what Remco says, but obviously still, I mean, it's not that the whole market is certified yet, but kind of the ones that work with more sustainable products, by now, most of them have a range of certifications. And in that sense, yeah, within the niche, you don't differentiate maybe that much anymore, but in terms of the overall market, these certifications do still kind of bring you into a certain special position. And then, yes, I think, well, on the one hand, we can see further developments in certifications, also new certifications coming up. that are trying to have different approaches, because obviously what everybody is always looking into is the high price, the complicated systems, the very also still unreliable systems, because they are very I mean, if you have an audit once per year or something, I mean, this is just this one short moment, and obviously has not much to do necessarily with reality. So the baseline, I think, will change dramatically. We will see probably way more automated things, data analytics, AI coming in. I know in terms of certifications for fibers, for example, there's companies working now with satellite data, analyzing landscapes from above, mixing this with drone videos, etc. A whole new style of certification will be coming up, but also this is still taking time until they really reach the market in a relevant way. I think we're still going to see at least 5 years going by. So at the moment we are stuck with most of these classic certifications, where I would always suggest, yeah, you basically it's a calculation. You know, the investment you do, what do you see as potential outcome? What kind of buyers that you have or you aim for do look for this, might even need this, because they by now already have some criterias that if they buy certain products that they want to sell as sustainable, they need to be certified, because that's how their online shop works, etc. This might be internal requirements from your buyers by now already. So you should check that side out. And on the other hand, I would, if you don't need it, if you don't have clients that ask for certifications, and if they also on their hand say, our customers in the shops, they don't mind so much because we tell the story, then I would always recommend to take the money that you would invest in a certification and put it into your marketing or your storytelling, create better videos, better photos about how you actually work, and create your own transparency, because the really strengths of your product should always be your individual story, and the certification doesn't tell an individual story. And certification gives you like a kind of a streamlined general sustainability message,
which will help in the sense that you communicate to the world that a lot of the processes are in order. And in that sense, it also sometimes decreases your communications. In that sense, you could compare it to having good terms and conditions, which also provide at least partially more clarity and help you in communicate to the world what you stand for. But then again, as Max is saying, you have to make it more individual by the rest of your communication and marketing.
Cool, guys, that's really helpful. So we see this is the situation now. A few points that we are making is that it will change a lot. It will maybe become much more digital and maybe even blockchain related in the future. But it never means that you don't have your own need to have your own story. Your own story will always be differentiating you from other people. So tell your story, and we're going to get into that.
Yes, and what you will see, Kees, is that a lot of buyers, of course, they will take this certification and as the first point, and they will come and visit you and see with their own eyes.
Yeah, of course. So, but you, in the end, you're making the decision based on, does it help me in the market as well, and what does my buyer need? So, people, planet, and profits. So, also for time's sake, I want to move on to communication. And one of the remarks made in the box by Benjamin is this word greenwashing. There's so much greenwashing going on. Now, this company here on the left-hand side, they are saying sustainability is our way of life, and then they describe different ways and different themes they have, and then also their goals and targets. So for them, it's a way of life. How do we actually know what people are saying is true or false? Can it be greenwashing? And what is greenwashing anyway? Who can explain this idea of greenwashing? Max?
Well, I think the baseline idea of greenwashing is you talk more than you do. So I think this is maybe the easiest definition of greenwashing. I mean, in terms of sustainability, obviously. there's also by now already words like clean washing or queer washing or color washing, etc. So like you can do this in all kind of areas. So it's always a question of communication and kind of moving away from honest communication. And greenwashing can be done consciously or unconsciously. I actually personally believe a lot of companies are actively doing greenwashing, but not really even so conscious, because they just don't know how to use the words correctly, and they want to be kind of part, but they don't really understand the full topic yet. So in that sense, you can avoid greenwashing in the easiest way by just sticking to what you know and kind of your range of knowledge, really. And as soon as you start using words where you might not 100% know what they actually mean for your business, then most likely you're tapping into greenwashing.
Cool. Okay, that's a nice view on that. A lot of people say yes, but these people don't really believe in it. They do it because maybe the market wants it. Huh? They say, what's in it for me? And then if sustainability then gives them the percentages, then they go for it. Is that honest, dishonest, or can you do it from different motivations, Remco?
Well, you can obviously you can do it from different motivations, and like you also said, it's always a process. I mean, to stick to Max's story, the opposite is also happening a lot. Some people unintentionally do greenwashing. Other companies, they do a lot more well than they think they do, because for them it's natural, and they don't see it as special. So in that sense, it's always good to properly test yourself against the market, against the criteria, against the certifications, against the requirements, and see what you're already doing that is well. And then it's a matter of communicating it.
Okay, and now this idea of what's in it for me here, that you also look at, okay, what is it bringing my business when I go green? That is very healthy way. I think this again combines the people, planet, and profit side of your decisions, also on sustainability. So we are clearly saying yes, for whatever motivation, as long as you do it properly and don't go into the greenwashing, we would recommend it. So do we have to be perfect? Do we have to do it like everything in a perfect way, or is there room for growth always?
Yeah, Kees, you said it already. It is a process, and you have to start somewhere. And I mean, every long journey starts with the first step. So in that sense, first do your analysis, understand where you are. Also, like I said, understand what you already are doing well, and then make a plan for yourself and do it step by step. And you can take your buyers along in this story. That's a good thing. Buyers also do not expect you to be perfect, but when they see the attitude where you want to get the most out of it, improve yourself wherever you can, buyers will also buy into that, and they will appreciate your efforts. And especially if you do show that development over time, you create loyalty also.
Exactly. An interesting way is that, as Max just explained, is that lots of buyers are also still struggling with this or growing into it and taking the first steps into sustainability. So they basically can understand that you are too, and that could be a way to grow your sustainability concepts together. So now there's a big trend as well. I'm just quickly going over this in order not to lose time. One of the big influencers in our industry, David Shaw of View magazine, he always tells me the following. He says, we have a new age of revolution coming up. That means everybody's in the streets. We have a lot of civil protest, and this has a lot to do with the growing inequality in society on a global scale, in your countries, in our country, everywhere. And the most vocal group involved in this is the Gen Z, which is the youngest generation that we have, the teenagers. And they are very much vocal about climate change. They have been interviewed a lot, and they say climate change is our first priority, which of course makes sense because they are now the next ones living after us, and they see climate change as a real threat to their existence. So let me flip, sorry. Yeah, and then so what's underlying here is that this whole generation of youngsters and new consumers, they actually have no trust in the original authorities anymore. They don't trust government, they don't trust church or all the original or even big business. They have no trust. So they are looking around and say, who can I trust? Because basically consumers still want to be guided by honest businesses, David says. So this should be seen as an opportunity, he says. He says, if you are a company creating real change, however small, but if it's real change, then I think actually you're the new option for a lot of new consumers. So huge consumer trend, he calls it the age of honesty, and maybe he's just a positive or a woke guy or a hope punk, they sometimes call it. But I think he's very loud and vocal in the industry. And so when he says things like that, we should at least consider what he's saying.
And he's also quite commercial. So in that sense, he's also a realist, I would say.
He's in the middle of the market.
Yes.
So he's not talking from some high point or from the church. Now, Max, I would like to ask you a little bit, because we see a lot of initiative from at trade fairs as well, but also in this case from the trade fair organizations. So we actually know that Messe Frankfurt, who, for instance, own Ambiente, but also Hein Textile, that they are actually quite vocal in this discussion towards sustainability. Now, let's talk a little bit about the ethical style guide. You're in that jury. What is the ethical style guide and how does it work?
Well, ethical style guide, I'm not sure if I get the full history right, but Ambiente also had an experiment at some point having a trade show in the trade show that was focused on more sustainable products, which worked out like halfway, I guess. And they realized that that wasn't maybe the contemporary approach. And then they looked into creating a different way of how to highlight sustainable or more sustainable products that are exhibited at the Ambiente trade show. And to do that, they came up with the idea to invite exhibitors to apply and kind of describe why their products or their collections are more sustainable. There's a questionnaire for this. And they have created a jury, which I'm part of, and so are you, and a few more other experts that then judge based on the questionnaires. And that's always a bit of a well, always a new process in a way. Obviously, we as a jury, we came up with our criteria. We have discussed them a lot, but also there's always new questions. Every season there's new aspects, and one can see the companies develop further, become more sustainable. So also we as a jury, we always have to take in consideration what is the actual sustainability level we are on right now, and so who is actually still more sustainable. And yeah, and I think the main guide, the main effect of this is that you can see and feel sustainability during the trade show in a new level. And yeah, I mean, as we know, they want to push it further. So this is a development that Messe Frankfurt has been supporting for many years, and I think they also see now that the tipping point to sustainability becoming a really relevant everyday business aspect is now, and therefore you will see even more yeah, sustainability kind of highlighted at trade shows, I'm sure.
Okay, you're saying a few interesting things. One of the things you're saying is that it grew from an awareness in Messe that they should do this in a more focal way, more concentrated way, maybe with more impacts. It's a system for participants, exhibitors in the fair. So exhibitors are declaring themselves, and then what you're also saying is that it's an ongoing discussion in the jury. So we still have the same criteria, but we are kind of evaluating them differently as time goes on. So it's not a static process, it's evolving, it's changing.
Exactly. And I mean, it also yeah, everything around this around sustainability is always evolving. I mean, if you look at Messe Frankfurt, at least on the textile way, I have working with them for such a long time. I mean, the first time I got in touch with sustainability, there was 2007 at the back in the days, Hong Kong Asia Essential trade show in Hong Kong, a textile fabric trade show, and that's where they started. And for them, it developed over the years. With adding it to Heimtextil and then to Ambiente, and now you can see that after more than 10 years, or actually like nearly 15 years of Messe Frankfurt dealing with this and looking into how to highlight exhibitors that are doing sustainability work, that now it really becomes a necessity. So it took 10 to 15 years to grow this into a format that actually now has been accepted by the market. So I'm just highlighting this to also say there's been so much work done already now that everybody who's looking into sustainability now finds a really interesting infrastructure of things that are prepared and laid out there to help you tell your stories. You know, so the market is quite ready to really embrace sustainability-based products and sustainability-based companies, and there's a lot of support to highlight your work, which is also needed because still, if you are serious about sustainability, you have more work than others, and so you should also get more chances to celebrate that.
Cool, wonderful. Now Remco, for you, what is the significance for a trade fair organization to actually start this discussion and put it quite central in their business? Is that special? Do we see it more?
Yes. Well, we see it more and more, and it's a beautiful token that sustainability has a very big commercial side. It is a trade fair. The word is trade here, and the fact that these trade fairs they start to focus more and more on highlighting the producers that make products in a sustainable manner shows, just as Max is saying, the market is ready for it. So it is a big sign on the wall.
Cool. So, and maybe finally to add, also from my experience, is that what is so nice is that small scale and big exhibitors, they are both joining in. It's a very accessible system, and both can find their angles. There are criteria that can cater for both big business and small business. Check it out online to see if you would qualify. If you're participating in any of those fairs in the coming months, yes, make sure you get in the list.
Yeah, also I can really recommend, look at the online directories. I mean, I'm not sure with Ambiente, but at Heimtextil, for example, if you look into Green Directory and the exhibitors, you can look also at the products they do, and sometimes you can find the sustainable products being described, etc. So it's a good research base.
Cool. And by the way, and to finish this really off now, this topic, is that Max does the most amazing guided tours on sustainability over Heimtex. So he takes visitors across certain halls to meet actually manufacturers and exhibitors who are actually sustainable, and then they explain what they're doing. So that's very interesting, hands-on way of informing, but also inspiring visitors and buyers to also go for this. Sorry. So yeah, really lovely what you're doing, Max. Okay, on the topic of communication, we have discussed strategy. It could be a good point to be sustainable. Of course, you have to put it in practice. So you really have to practice what you preach, because Max said, yeah, you can have values, but if you don't put them in action, this could be greenwashing. And then there's an element of communication. So if you have something special, communicate it. One good example we saw here in the fair was this display here of duvet and kind of cushion covers with filling, and they were actually explaining what they were doing. Look, I'm zooming in a little bit. So they were saying in landfill, in so many days, this amount of percentage is actually degraded, biodegraded. And on the other hand, if it in the ocean, it takes so long, so many days for this percentage of the material to be biodegraded. I think a lovely way of visual way of describing what you're doing, and also very honest. And they're saying, actually, yeah, it's not in day one we are perfect. It takes time, and also the percentages will grow. So I think a very, very interesting visual, honest message about how you could communicate your impact. And how do we feel about impact in this sense? Is it, how can you describe your impact in further ways? Is it important to describe your impact? Who would like to touch upon impact communication? Are there any systems, and what do you actually describe? How do you do it?
I mean, yes, there's many systems, but I'm afraid that a lot of the systems are a bit more orientated for bigger companies still. But I'm always a fan of, first of all, I mean, we had that word now before anyway here, honesty, and just kind of really looking at your own business. You can always start with your own analysis, and obviously it makes sense if you have a peer group, if you have people that might consult you before you kind of publish something. But I think you can always, first of all, just look with your own logic into your impact, and go through with that, maybe with your co-workers, employees, etc., to check like that you're not forgetting something. So yeah, I mean, there can be a very scientific and complex process to calculate your impact, but there can also be a very hands-on personal way of like, okay, this is actually what I can see, and then you start the process with that. And we've highlighted that before. It's anyway a process, a journey. And yes, I think customers, really also end customers here, they are starting to appreciate this much more, and for sure it will be a very important part of all your communication next couple of years, with all this legislation coming up and people being educated towards the products becoming a transparent thing in the future. So your impact, in whatever way you start looking into it now, I would really recommend write it down and yeah, start this process. You need to know about your impact, and if you don't know about it, you can just really start with a mini workshop internally and see like what everybody can come up with and understand, because impact, yeah, happens everywhere and can be multifolded in its styles. It can be social impact, cultural impact, environmental impact. You know, I mean, there could be so much if you look even into psychology. But to stick to the baselines, first of all, obviously look into your materials. Where do they come from? Who works on it? Be really hands-on. Who is your main suppliers, co-workers? You write it down and you get an idea of your impact, first of all, of your direct impact. And that's actually, if you compare yourself with like big companies nowadays, that's what most of them do at the moment for themselves. They look into their direct impact. That's where the market stands. We always talk about like scope 1, 2, 3. This is kind of then, if you look into methodologies of CO2 footprinting, for example, if we get into that, most companies are still focused on themselves, analyzing where they are. So if you do that for yourself without a CO2 footprinting tool, fine, and then step by step, you will also find tools that enable you to get a rough idea of your CO2 footprint by just putting in some data of your supply chain, or the same for water footprinting. You can find tools like this online nowadays and then kind of grow from there.
Cool. So yeah, what I like about you saying is that yes, we should all start to do this, but it doesn't necessarily have to be high tech or digitalized or, you know, very expensive. Start with your own story, and you will find out it could be very exciting to measure how many people are we actually reaching in our chain, who are they, and how is it impacting them. That could be a very, very nice journey of understanding more about your own values and your impacts. So don't think high tech, don't think big business. Also small businesses can and should be really going into this. Now we actually have a few nice examples of storytelling lined up, which I think this could be Remco checking this out. Would you show us two of those websites, Remco?
Yes, Kees. Is it possible to transfer to my screen?
Yeah, sure. And Jantien will do that for us. And then afterwards we come back to
Switch now to Remco.
Cool.
Can you see the website of Chaco Zanzibar?
Or are we still in? No, I don't think so.
Okay. That's a bit of a glitch. Here it says not showing anything.
Yeah, you should maybe click on that third window behind the microphone and the camera.
Yes.
Yeah, now you're there. Okay, make it as
Good.
big as possible.
Yes, I do. Can't do it any bigger than this.
Okay.
Is this well visible?
Sure.
Good. Well, let's start with Chaco Zanzibar. And as you may know, Zanzibar is a beautiful island visited by many tourists close to the coast of Tanzania. And Chaco actually started selling products tourist to tourist, as they called it, making souvenirs for tourists from the wastes that tourists actually produce. And you can imagine, being such a popular holiday island, tourists also generate a lot of waste. And Chaco wanted to find a solution for that, how to turn that waste, how to upcycle that waste into actual products. Now, they evolved from a company selling locally to tourists to a company exporting to other continents, including Europe. And what they are actually doing, they focus both on the social side of the business and the planet side of the business. So it's planet and people. But planet has a very strong accent with them. I'll show another example where the focus is more on the social side of the business. But what Chaco does, and as you see here, a lot of the products they make, they are actually made from throwaway bottles. Tourists, when they visit bars, cafes, hotels, restaurants, you can imagine there's a lot of bottles being used, and that has turned into a bit of a waste problem. Now, Chaco has turned that waste problem around, and they've upcycled all these glass products into beautiful vases, lighting fixtures, candle stands, etc., etc. They also say they empower women. They train a lot of women in production and help them forward in life. But I wanted to show this example as an example where the planet side get the most emphasis. Now, another company, not from...
Can I just quickly ask a question also to Max, maybe? Because in the jury of the ethical style guide, we often have recycled glass, and we often talk about, yeah, but recycling glass, maybe it only works sustainable when you don't have a very active collection system in your country, because actually if people recycle a lot of glass and it's recycled by industry and coming back into the system, maybe then you don't need to do this. Or how? So is it different for different countries, different contexts to look at this kind of recycling?
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's the problem, but also the beauty in terms of storytelling. Sustainability is always depending on the context of where you are. In Germany, we have a deposit system for glass bottles and a recycling scheme for glass bottles that works relatively well. So here I would find no argumentation for saying that this is like a really great benefit for the overall sustainability development. But if you are in a space where there's no system, no infrastructure, no recycling system, or not so perfect waste infrastructures, etc., then coming up with solutions like this obviously has a direct impact and should be seen as a relevant sustainability aspect. So yeah, same thing in a different place in this world might be evaluated very differently. This concept would definitely not work well in Berlin, but in Zanzibar, I think it has a clear relevance, and yeah, it's actually a smart and progressive sustainability project.
Cool. That's a very interesting insight, huh? That sustainability and how it makes sense really differs on your context as well. Remco, can you move on to the next one?
Yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about Basha. Like Chaco, they also recycle materials, but the main emphasis in their story is also on the social side. As you see, products to love, it always starts with the product, but a life of dignity for the women who make them. And the women that work at Basha are what they call women at risk, survivors of trafficking, women being saved from prostitution. And that is actually the reason that Basha was founded. And that's also how they tell the story. All the artisans, they have their own story on the website of Basha. There's more than 200 stories which you can go through that tell how these women work, what working at Basha means for them, how their life has improved, and all the products, they also carry the name of the specific woman that made that particular product. And everything that Basha does is in order to create what they call a healthy, healing, and supportive environment. And that goes pretty far. They also work together with all kinds of NGOs in Bangladesh where Basha is. They work together with NGOs saving women, but also, for instance, on a more daily basis, like providing care for the children. They have a daycare center at where they work. So you see that the social side of this business has been very, very well developed, and the way they also communicate it on their website has a very dominant place.
Cool. Okay, very inspiring. Just two examples of how companies just like you are telling their stories and how interesting this could be. Huh? This is impact on a very directly human level. Yes, thanks so much for that, Remco.
Most welcome.
Switch back to me, Jantien, because we're slowly getting to the end of our presentation.
1 second.
Can I change presenter?
Yes, I'm changing.
Okay, that's cool. Can you see this?
You're now the presenter.
Okay, let me see how I tweak this. Okay, can we all see this?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Okay, another final example, and we're not going to go too deeply in it, but we were touched a little bit by this handmade and heart-made payoff or communication, this line, which is very interesting. This is Ali Lamu, Kenya, and they do also bags from recycled materials. And they touch upon an extra dimension of sustainability today, is which it touches your heart, not only the maker's heart, but also very much this consumer's heart. Today, sustainability is very much close to you as a consumer. Huh? It's an emotional value that you are adding, and they are kind of referring to this. And remember, some time ago, we talked about wellness in home. I'm sure you remember it. And this consumer now is looking for many different ways of being a better person by buying home products. And here we have it, more ethical and greener. It really makes consumers feel good about themselves and how they consume. So this is the emotional element that we are slowly adding now by sustainability. So wellness and sustainability today are very much connected, and this quest for wellness is so core to consumer trends, and it will, I'm sure, be with us forever. That keep this in mind, that also not only sustainability has a rational side to it, where we measure impact, but you're also able to touch the heart of this consumer looking for becoming a better person. Don't forget about that one. So that was the final word as far as we are concerned. We are very open now to answering questions from you. As I said before, hopefully we have already answered all of it, but don't hold back. Just come to us in the question box and give us any question that you still want to ask.
Yeah, there was a question from Ahmed Goma saying, should I have all the mentioned certification? I think we answered that. Look at certifications that could be relevant for you. And as Max was saying, you can also do without certification if you are able to properly communicate everything that you're doing well and also prove it to potentially interested buyers. So in that sense, it's an individual decision, but it does give an edge to your marketing and your communication. And there's also the reverse equation where sometimes via platforms that do certifications, buyers will approach you. So in that sense, certification can also help you, but it's a very individual decision which you have to look into yourself. If you want to establish for yourself, and that's another question from Fiona, where you are in terms of a sustainable approach, there are self-assessment tests you can do via organizations that do certification, and that will help you to establish where you are at the moment.
Cool. Anything else from your side, people, before we summarize?
Well, I mean, just on terms of like self-analytics, maybe that's not perfect because it's not from the home textile ground, but it's very close, and fashion obviously is always very influential on home textiles anyway. I could also recommend to look at the platform Good on You, which is a rating platform for fashion brands, and there you can see how in the fashion market at the moment brands are being looked at, if you look from a kind of more critical sustainability point of view, and how they do their storytelling. So that could be quite inspiring, maybe.
Cool. So that's Good on You, yeah?
Yeah.
Sending it in the question box. Thanks for that addition. You're making.
And there was a question from Benjamin Rügeberg,
yeah.
like on CBI's take on certifications.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm sure we have talked about it, certification where necessary and where it helps you. CBI doesn't push particular certification. That's not our role. So he mentions, I think, fair trade, also as an expensive one. But, you know, most certifications cost something. The WFTO none is not necessarily more expensive than anything else. It just, yeah, takes your attention, your admin, and really your commitment. So if you just use certification to stick them on your booth or your products, then I think you're not doing the right thing. If you use it to explain your impact and create more markets, then I think the investment should always be worth it.
Yeah.
But I think one thing to the certification, because I think it's also quite important that you, with your buyer of your product, see whether they require a certification and which one they require. So then you can work together in that value chain if any certifications are required for a certain market.
Yes, so it's part of the legal requirements sometimes, and sometimes it's non-legal. And then, of course, you always ask your buyer, do you have any preference? Because it is also a marketing tool.
Yeah, but I think that the least expensive ways into this at the moment is like newer tools that are, for example, blockchain based and that are basically pure transparency tools. So that's kind of the at the moment maybe the quickest development in around certification verification systems, and mostly they are more inexpensive to become part of it, but also they are not as clear. They're not giving you the same kind of messages like a certification, but they help you to kind of verify your claims. So this can maybe be like a compromise in between.
Okay, okay. But again, keep in mind that certification is not the end all and be all. It's all about your storytelling and how you describe your impact and how you're able to prove it and be honest about it. Anything else from any of you? I think we've covered most of them.
Yes, I think we did cover, we have some questions also on trade fairs and some ideas, but I think if you go to our website, to the sector home decoration, home textile, we have there a lot in our studies and tips on how to attend to trade fairs if you're not able to attend, how you can attend maybe online, and also how to find buyers and how to find your market. So please check the studies, because they are very worthwhile to read, and it gives you very valuable and very hands-on and practical information.
And free of charge.
Make a little end to the webinar because we're running a bit out of time.
Cool. I have one final slide for you to summarize. I'll do this very quickly, and then we have Mimi finishing off. So we talked about sustainable design. What is it? And I hope we all agree now that it's the combination, the balance between your 3 Ps. We talked about circular economy. Yes, a very worthwhile goal to go for, but in most of your cases, it's good to start and focus on your end of the cycle and do the best that you can there. So keep it doable is what we're saying. We talked about legal requirements, and one of the conclusions was there will be much more of this, and it will be much wider and broader coming to you. So follow us and follow our regulations. We talked about is it a way of life or is it greenwashing? What people are doing, we are saying keep it real, just tell your own story, try to describe it as much as you can, and don't go overboard in anything. We see industry is pushing this whole sustainability question, and that means it's here to stay. It's not a short-term trend anymore. Sustainability is really becoming mainstream very quickly, so be part of it, we're saying. And don't forget to touch the heart. Okay, then I think final word for our colleague Mimi, who has also something to say about what Max already touched upon, is that in fashion and in food, we're already maybe a little bit more advanced in sustainability. And she's making a point about this. Let me see if I can play her movie just for the minute.
Thank you for having me.
Here she is.
I'm Mimi Sewalski. I'm the CEO of avocadostore.de. We are selling pretty much everything, but not avocados. So what are we selling? We are a niche marketplace for sustainable products. That means we're not an online shop. We look like an online shop, but merchants, designers, labels, companies sell via us. You could imagine it like an Amazon for green products. We're feeling like it's more than a trend, and the thing why I think it's getting out of the niche. The big companies, the big online shops, they're all starting to do something with sustainability. They have like a category, or they have labels and stuff like that. So something changed, and the thing with sustainability is you can't go backwards. The more you know, the more you go forward. Sustainability trend, it started mostly with food, so organic food in the supermarkets, for example, and then even organic supermarkets. And later it went to fashion, so fair and organic and environmental produced fashion. And I think the reason why it's getting out of the niche and also getting into the living area, products like we can see here now, is that if you think about your lifestyle and you come from food and fashion, the next natural thing is just to look into your flat and your surrounding. And this is what is happening right now. It's more than a trend. It's getting the sustainability is getting the new normal.
Okay. That was a very powerful final message by Mimi, saying it's a logical approach from sustainable food and fashion now into home, and it also means it's here to stay. And hopefully today we made that point, that we're definitely not talking about an irrelevant small term trend, but we're talking about a mainstream thing that is coming towards all of us, and we should all embrace it. So thank you very much, Max, Remco, for being part of this, and we hope to see you soon again. Thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thanks also.
Sorry, Max. Thank you very much for taking your time, and thank you, Kees and Remco, to take us through this sustainability journey. And very special thanks to Max to help us on this and explain very clearly what it's all about. And thanks the attendees for joining us today. I think it was very good, informative subject. There's still a lot to do, still a lot to talk about. So stay tuned, and thank you for attending, and have a very good day.